All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So in today's presentation, we are talking all about upper body training for hikers, which is an area which is often overlooked in the world of hiking, but it is very important. So to start with, a little bit about upper body training. When it comes down to it, hikers, in all honesty, with their training, love to really focus on lower body training, both in their strength training, so when they're actually, doing exercises, dumbbells, body weight, whatever it may be, and also in their cardio, when they're looking at stair climbing and strength and pack walking and all of that jazz. And it is true that for hikers, the majority of your training probably should be focusing on lower body because obviously that's the most relevant thing. Those are the areas that are getting the most work when you're actually out on the trail. However, it is a mistake if you're completely neglecting your upper body. It is important to still give it a little bit of attention, and it is definitely very beneficial to give it a little bit of attention. So today we're going to be diving into this subject a little bit. Now, essentially what we're going to be covering is number one, why upper body training is important for hikers. Number two, a few simple principles around upper body training for hiking, and also a few of my favorite exercise options to kind of get you started, give you some visual examples of all of this. So let's get into it. Why train upper body? What is the point for hikers? A few people may be wondering. Now, there are a few sort of particular benefits when it comes down to this. Number one, training upper body can play a pretty significant role in making pack carrying much more comfortable, whether you're carrying a day pack or a full pack or anything in between, purely for the fact that your torso will be doing a decent amount of work to keep you upright when you got a pack on. Your back muscles will be working, your shoulders will be working, all of that jazz. It is important to make sure you're keeping it comfortable. On top of that is making sure you can actually get your pack on your back, which a lot of people don't really think about, but some hikers do struggle with that. So that's number one. Number two is strength training, particularly through the upper body in this example, can help prevent pain and injury during trips and falls. Now, strength training, so building up the resilience and the tolerance of your muscles, of your joints, is one of the single most important things you can do to both reduce pain and injury. And when it comes down to hiking, we don't often think about upper body injuries, but it does tend to happen if someone's sort of going along and they have a bit of a trip and they put their hands out to catch themselves, or they fall a little bit awkwardly, or if they're rock scrambling, or if they're on a river crossing and they kind of tip over, or whatever it is, the upper body can sometimes be used for those, emergency stabilizations. And if the upper body isn't strong enough, sometimes, those trips can actually turn into something that's a little bit worse. So that is a really significant thing. On the pain front, a lot of people do struggle with a bit of neck pain from carrying packs, a little bit of sort of upper back pain, sometimes a little bit of middle back pain or whatever it may be. Upper body training can help reduce this. Now, on top of that, there are a lot of hikers out there, particularly, when we're looking at people maybe over 40 years old or whatever it may be, who need to pay attention to bone density because bone density, osteopenia, osteoporosis is such a significant thing for a lot of people, both in hiking, like if you're dealing with that, obviously that increases the risk of us breaking bones on the trail, and also everyday life. And strength training is so crucial for helping maintain bone density and reducing the risk of that getting worse and worse if you're already suffering from that. Next up is upper body training can increase the comfort and performance while using trekking poles. Now, trekking poles, I think almost every hiker will get benefits from. I advocate for them a lot. And one thing a lot of people do realize is when they start using poles, sometimes their arms can get sore, sometimes their shoulders can get sore, or whatever it may be. So increasing the strength can help with that. On top of that is when you are on steep climbs and actually using the trekking poles to help you, again, if you have stronger upper body or stronger upper limbs, that can actually be a little bit easier. And then also on top of that, it can aid you during rock scrambling, steeper climbing, when you're actually getting your hands involved and you actually have to do some climbing stuff, upper body pretty valuable. So all in all, there's a few really specific benefits and great benefits, particularly for hikers when it looks at this type of training. So next up, I want to cover some common mistakes when it comes down to upper body training for hikers. So yes, there are a lot of hikers out there who completely neglect and absolutely do zero upper body training. And there are many hikers who still do a little bit, but there are a few mistakes I typically see. Now, mistake number one is training like a bodybuilder. And this doesn't just fall into upper body training, but it falls into all strength training in itself. In the sense of when a lot of people think about strength training, they think about going to a gym. They think about doing, 10, 12, 15 different exercises, working this muscle, then this muscle, then this muscle, then this muscle. It's what a lot of us have been introduced to. It's a lot of what of us think about when it comes to strength training. but I would argue it's not particularly necessary for hikers. And when it comes down to upper body training, a lot of hikers do fall into this situation where they'll go into a gym or they'll be at home and they're like, I'll do an exercise for my chest, then another exercise for my chest, then another one for my shoulders, then my back, then my biceps, then my triceps, then this, then that, then this, then that. They end up doing like 10 different exercises for their upper body or whatever it may be. And it ends up just being a little bit excessive. Essentially, when it comes down to hiking, for hikers, we're not bodybuilders. We don't want to spend our life in the gym. We don't want to spend our life doing strength training. Ultimately, we really just want to make sure we ensure our training is focused and time efficient. And you can get a lot of work done, a lot of improvement done with a very, very small amount of work if you do the right things. Now, if you're in the situation where you love that type of training, that's really, really pleasurable, enjoyable for you, happy days, awesome. But if you're someone who sort of struggles to fit in training already, if you're someone who doesn't particularly love strength training or whatever it may be, which a lot of hikers fall into, just know there is a better way. Now, mistake number 2 is neglecting certain muscle groups. And many hikers, when it comes down to their training and their upper body training, they will do a lot of exercises which tend to hit the kind of the chest and the shoulders, like the sort of front of the upper body. So things like push-ups and chest press and shoulder press and all of these sort of motions where we're just pushing. Number 1, because it's really accessible. A lot of people can do this without really any type of equipment. Push-ups are super easy wherever you go. And also number 2, a lot of people will do this in group exercise classes. So whether you're doing something like CrossFit or whether you're doing something like body pump or any type of sort of small group training, a lot of those classes tend to emphasize really pushing, purely for the fact that it's easy to coach, purely for the fact that it's space efficient. There's a bunch of different reasons to go into it. Realistically, when it comes down to our upper body training, we want to make sure we're not just training certain muscles, but we want to kind of balance out the exercises. So we're training both the front of the upper body and also the back of upper body as well, making sure we're getting a good mix of everything, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. So when it comes down to upper body training for hiking, there's a few really simple principles that I typically recommend for most hikers out there to kind of get the most out of this type of training in the shortest amount of time possible. Number 1 is focus on compound exercises. So essentially what a compound exercise is, an isolation exercise is something that just focuses on one muscle at a time. So something like tricep push downs where you've got a band and pushing down and just isolating the triceps, or bicep curls where you're just curling up and you're just doing the biceps. Those are isolation exercises. Now, compound exercises are basically exercises just work multiple muscle groups at a time. So it's not just one muscle, but multiple. For example, a push-up. So when you're doing a push-up, you're working the chest, you're working the shoulders, working a bit of the triceps. It's working multiple muscle groups at a time. This is pretty time efficient because you don't have to just isolate every single muscle you're doing, but you can kind of cover, a few different bases. Now, in all honesty, when it comes down to it, 95% of hikers are probably going to get the most benefits from their strength training from just focusing on compound exercises. You don't have to worry about this isolation stuff. You don't have to even think about doing this. Just focusing on these sort of bigger exercises and compound exercises, 95% of hikers are getting the most benefits out of that. That the 5% there really comes down to the people who may want to do this is if you have lots and lots of time to do your strength training and you do enjoy this type of strength training where you're just isolating this and that, like that's enjoyable for you, you might be the exception. Lots of time, enjoy it, go for your life. On top of that, if you have been prescribed specific isolation exercises from someone like a physio or physical therapist, probably worthwhile listening to them as well. But it's that outside of those situations, you probably don't need to be doing them. Now, the next general principle is finding a balance between push and pull. So as I sort of said before, we want to make sure we are training the body in balance. And there's a few different ways you can kind of go about this, but probably the most simple strategy that you can kind of wrap your head around this without even having too much knowledge around strength training is balancing this push and pull. So essentially what you want to be doing is when you're looking at your training over a week's period, you want to make sure you're finding a balance between both pushing exercises and pulling exercises. And this is pretty much what they sound like. Pushing exercises is anything where you're pushing against resistance. So it might be a push-up, it might be a chest press on a machine or a dumbbell, it might be a shoulder press with dumbbells or barbell or anything like that, literally where you're pushing. Pulling exercises, same thing. Rowing when we're kind of pulling into ourselves, pull-ups or pull-downs when we're like pulling straight down, and pull-aparts where we're pulling things apart. Like literally, that's it. That's all it is. And essentially, the simplest way that you can figure this out for yourself is for each pushing exercise we do over a week's period, we kind of want to balance this out with a pulling exercise. Really simple. So basically, for every pushing one, you're going to do a pulling one. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's a great rule of thumb to try and follow. Now, as a bonus on this, is then if you do want to take this as a little step further and make it even more beneficial, you can then break up pushing and pulling through what's called horizontal and vertical. So essentially horizontal is basically anything going in a horizontal plane of motion. So horizontal push is kind of pushing straight out from you. Horizontal vertical is pulling straight towards you. Pretty simple. Horizontal pull is pulling straight towards you. Sorry about that. Now vertical, same thing. Vertical push, straight above your head. Vertical pull, pulling from above your head to down. Now, if you want to take this a little step further, if you can kind of find a balance between all of these things, and for every vertical push you do a vertical pull, and for every horizontal push, you do a horizontal pull, that's even better. It isn't always doable for people, particularly if you're training at home, you don't have access to certain machines in the gym. It does get a little bit tricky, but if you want to take it a little bit step further, that's a really, really good principle to follow. But main thing is just finding that balance between push and pull as a whole. Now, before I go any further, some people may come to this point of the presentation like, okay, Rowan, yeah, you're making kind of sense, but this is a little bit all over my head. I kind of need a little extra direction from here. And yes, this information is useful, but I kind of need a little bit more help here. If you are a bit of a beginner in regards to strength training for your hiking, you never really explored it, you're not really sure what you're doing, I do have something free which may be really, really useful for you. Essentially what I have is I have a free mini course around getting started with strength training for hiking. Now inside this mini course, you'll learn some more benefits around just general strength training for hikers and why it can be so good. You'll understand a little bit more of the principles of effective strength training. So I just touched on a couple of things there, but we expand on a little bit more. And also, most importantly, you'll learn how to create your own strength training workouts for your hiking. So we'll talk you through a really simple process. We'll give you some templates, give you some examples, and by the end of the course, you'll actually know how to put together your own strength workouts to best help you with your hiking. So if you were a little bit lost or wanting a little bit extra direction on that, this is a great option for you. It's completely free. All you need to do to get your hands on that is go to summitstrength.com.au/strength-mini-course. That's summitstrength.com.au/strength-mini-course. You can sign up for free. You just got to plug in your details and it'll get emailed over to you. So with that being said, let's keep on moving forward. So next thing I kind of want to cover is a few of my favorite examples in it when it comes down to upper body strength exercises to give you a little bit of a visual into this type of thing. So to start with, we're going to start with the 3-point row. So essentially this particular exercise, it develops strength through the back and the biceps. So this is what's known as a horizontal pull, because as you've seen, you can pulling horizontally. Now, essentially, this particular version I'm doing here is a great one you can do at home with just a backpack. Most hikers will have access to that. You can also do it with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. It's all the same, as long as you're having some weight where you're pulling up and down, pulling down. For this particular exercise, it's pretty simple. You just set yourself up in this position, pull up, pull down, pull up, pull down. Really, really simple. Ideally, putting a little bit of slight pause at the top and just making sure when we're lowering it, it's relatively controlled. And essentially to make this a little bit easier and more difficult, as with any strength exercise, you can just adjust the weight. So you can do more weight if you want to make it harder, you can do less weight if you want to make it easier. Pretty simple. But it's a really, 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 really useful exercise and very, 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 very beneficial in that horizontal pull motion. Now, next one, we're talking about the floor press. So this particular exercise is working strength through the chest, the triceps, maybe a little bit of shoulders as well. And this is what's called a horizontal push because we're literally pushing up and down. Now, essentially, this particular exercise in this video, I'm demonstrating. Well, one of my coaches here is demonstrating with dumbbells, but it can be done with a kettlebell, just holding a single kettlebell. It can be used even using a backpack if you're at home. And again, loading up a backpack, doing exactly the same thing, pushing up, pushing down. Main thing to think about with this one is just making sure you are controlling on the way down and just not letting it drop. Now, for this particular exercise, this is kind of typically an entry-level exercise that we do for a lot of our hikers, of just getting their heads around that. If you do want to make this a little bit harder, you can do this off a bench. So you're lying on a bench and that way your elbows can go a little bit lower. Or if you don't have access to a bench, you can kind of do this on a foam roller at home where you're lying across the foam roller and you can just get a little bit deeper. Or again, you can add a little bit extra weight. Really, really simple. But again, very, 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 very basic, but can be pretty useful. Now, next one is a pull down. So this particular exercise, this is one of those vertical pull exercises. And admittedly, this type of thing can be a little bit tricky for some hikers to fit in, particularly if they are training at home. It's very, very accessible if you're training in a gym, but at home, it gets a little bit tricky. But this is an option that you can do if you're training at home. May work for some people, may not work for others. So essentially what this one is doing is you get a band, like one of these long bands, and you can either loop it around the top of the door or you can attach it to something that's relatively high. And as you can see in the video, you're pulling straight down and up, pulling straight down and up. It is an option. Again, a lot of people won't be able to do it, but that's absolutely fine. If you're at the gym, you can replace this with something like a cable pull down where you're doing the same motion, but you're on like a cable machine, or even like chin ups or assisted pull ups or something like that. And that's another option for you there. Now, this video isn't actually myself, so I just want to give credit to Coach Josh Wood. He's someone I work with quite closely. Awesome coach. Highly recommend you check out his stuff. But yeah, this video is his. Now, next one, final one I kind of want to show you. Oops, let's go back. Final one I want to show you here is a half kneeling overhead press, which is another great exercise. Essentially, this one develops strength through the shoulders. This can be done with a dumbbell, a kettlebell, or again with a pack where you can just push straight up and straight down. And essentially, this is our vertical push. So we've basically shown you the 4 exercises here. Horizontal push and pull, and then vertical pull and push. Really simple, but just some simple examples here. Now, there are 1,000,001 ways to do all of these, by the way. There are so many different exercise versions, but this is just kind of give you a bit of a visual around what they kind of look like and give it extra context into kind of how those recommendations fall into place. Now, essentially, when it comes down to putting this information together, as I sort of said, if you just want to like get a really simple template, really simple directions, get your hands on that free mini course. That'll help you out. But if you're just trying to figure things out from this video, a few bits and pieces. Now, most hikers, in all honesty, when it comes down to most hikers out there, you could probably get away with just doing 2 upper body exercises per week, 1 pushing and 1 pulling. Now, if you have time in your training to do more, you can probably fit in more. Whether you want to do 3 or 4 in a week, that's fine. But most hikers can probably get away with doing 2 of these per week. And I get a lot of my hikers doing this in their training. Now, for a lot of people, you might be like, oh, you know what? I've actually been doing like 8 exercises per workout and a couple of times a week. That sounds like nothing. And it may not seem like much, but when we're looking at the greater context in regards to training for hiking, as we sort of said, upper body training, it's good to you don't want to ignore it, but it is a small part of the whole equation. And when it comes down to a hiker in their week, they want to be focusing on lower body strength training, which is probably going to be, do more of that than their upper body. They want to fit in core, they want to fit in mobility. There's definitely a lot of cardio, hiking itself, balance. There's a whole bunch of other things that fits into the equation in a training week for a hiker. So we don't want to get too caught up in just spending too much time here. So typically you can get away with doing 2 upper body for most people, in all honesty. But if you want to do more, that's absolutely fine. And essentially, if you're only doing 2, as I sort of said, we kind of want to explore those 4 different movement patterns. What you can do is just over time, you can just change which ones you do. So you might do 4 weeks of doing horizontal push and pull, and then the next 4 weeks you might do vertical push and pull, and just alternate like that, or whatever it is. So you're kind of getting exposures to all of these different bits and pieces. Pretty simple. Now, next up, a few little tips for success. So if you are only doing a small amount of strength training, how are you going to make sure you're actually improving? One of the most important things is just finding the right intensity. So we do need a certain element of challenge when it comes to strength training to see the best results. No, you don't have to go absolutely crazy and push yourself to the limit and absolutely, do those really difficult things where you're kind of failing and just not feeling great. You don't have to go there, but we do need an element of challenge. Now, for myself, for my hikers, I like to advocate for what's called 2 reps in reserve, which is a really simple method of training, method of intensity, which can ensure you get that right balance of challenge, not doing too much, and also helps vary around person to person. So it's really simple. You basically decide how many repetitions you're going to do, whether it's 6 repetitions, 8 repetitions, 10, 12, 15, whatever you're deciding to do. And again, if you don't know how to do that, don't know how to put that in or what reps you should be doing, get your hands on that free mini course. It'll give you some direction there. But essentially, whatever reps you're doing, you want to find a weight, you want to find a resistance, you want to find a difficulty where essentially you can do those repetitions. And if you had to really push yourself to the absolute limit, you could do a 2 extra. And that's it. So in the example of, hey, I want to do 10 repetitions, you find a weight that if you were really motivated, really pushed yourself, you could actually do 12 repetitions, but you just finish at 10. And that way, again, you get that balance between enough challenge, but also just not pushing yourself to the absolute limit. And that works really well. And as you get stronger, you just adjust your weights, so you're always having those 2 reps in reserve. Now, other important thing is progression over time in the sense of, it comes down to any type of training. Progression is key because the body gets used to things pretty quickly. And we need to constantly be and regularly be giving it new challenge, new stimulus in order to ensure it's keeping on moving forward. So essentially, each time you do one of these exercises, just try to push yourself a little bit more. So each time you do it, add a little extra weight, add an extra kilo or an extra pound or whatever it may be. That can be enough. Add some pauses. So, some of the exercises I've demonstrated before, there are certain pauses in movements which can add a little bit extra difficulty. So slow down those pauses, make it a little bit harder. Or even just add some extra repetitions. One week do 10, next week do 11, next week do 12, and add a little bit extra there. Whatever you need to do, just make it a little bit more difficult each time you do it. And then typically every 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, depending on how you're doing things, change exercises. So you don't want to be doing the same exercise again and again and again and again and again and again, because it can get a little bit boring. And if you're not, don't know what you're doing, you may end up stagnating a little bit. So every 4 exercises, just change exercise. 4 weeks or so, just change exercises. I was doing one of these ones and demonstrate on the video. Next 4 weeks, I'm going to do something similar, but just a little bit different. Pretty simple. And then final little key to success is getting exposure to some lower rep challenging stuff and also some higher rep options. So what I mean by that is sometimes doing things that you can do 15 repetitions, 20 repetitions. That can be really, really good for endurance stuff. Sometimes doing things that you can only do about 8 of them, or maybe even 6 of them if you're confident, or whatever it may be. And getting exposure to both high resistance and low resistance, really, really, really valuable for hikers. I won't go into it too much today, but it is a really, really common thing that a lot of hikers will be like, I don't need to do more challenging weights. I'm just going to do high repetitions because it's just endurance based and that's best for hiking. That's only half the equation. You will get the best benefits out of everything, getting exposure to both. And again, if you don't know how to put this all together, you can check out that free mini course. And on top of that, if you did want to take this a little step further, hopefully this presentation did give you a few insights in regards to applying upper body training for your hiking. But I fully understand if sometimes, look, this is just a little bit too much for people and they're like, yeah, this makes sense, but I don't know how to put this into my situation or whatever it may be. So if you were looking for some personalized help with all of this, I would love to chat with you. Essentially, through Summit Strength, we offer personalized training programs for hikers to help them get fit, strong, resilient for their adventures. That is what we do every single day. That is what we're experts in. Now, typically what our packages includes is number one, we'll create a custom and personalized workout program to get you ready for anything the trail may throw at you, including things like strength training, cardio, hiking programming, recovery mobility work, making sure we're covering all the different things you need to get in the best possible position for your adventures. Now, on top of that, we also put a big emphasis into the education side of things as well, and we'll educate you on all the peripheral factors which can make or break an adventure, such as nutrition, recovery, self-care, mental strength, pain prevention, bunch of other things. And on top of that, we'll also give you the coaching, support, and accountability to keep you on track through all the ups and downs that life likes to throw at you. Now, if you did want to learn a little bit more about that, how we go about things, and potentially book in a time to chat and go over your situation, you can go to summitstrength.com.au/online. There's a big video on there which talks through our program, and if you want to explore it a little bit more, you can book a call with us. We can have a little bit of a chat and ultimately just see if and how this may be right for you. But that will probably do us for today. Obviously a bit of information in there, but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that helps a few people. Hopefully that gives you some insights into this upper body stuff, because it is very, 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 very valuable if you just do the right things. So any questions of all that, please let me know, but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.